Hey everybody, it's Doug Green and I'm the publisher of Technology Reseller News, and I'm very pleased to have with me again Dave Beagle of Ooma. Dave, thank you for joining me today.
Hey Doug, nice to see you again. It's been a while. Glad to be here.
Well, I'm glad we're doing this, and this is a very urgent message. People have heard about this so far, I hope, but they're needing to hear more about it. It's time to do the POTS replacement. It's time to basically at least look at it, and for the channel partners and for many other people, this is a huge opportunity. So, before I know we have some slides to get through, but how long do we have before POTS lines have to be POTS lines will be completely decommissioned?
I don't think there's really been a set final date. Now, certain organizations are looking at when they're going to deprecate. AT&T, for example, last fall in their investor meeting announced that they wanted to deprecate all their copper lines by the end of 2029. So if we use that as kind of like the gauge, if you will, it kind of gives you an idea that, with I'd say conservatively an estimate of 10 million, POTS lines that are still out there, you'd in essence be looking at trying to deliver or move off of about 8,500 lines a day starting today. So that's pretty significant,
10 million lines, 8,500 lines a day.
Yeah, and that's conservative. I mean, some people have actually put out there's more than that. Like, I've heard 20 million, I've heard 30 million, I've heard 40 million. But yeah, again, if you just look at it from a conservative standpoint, you can see that there's still a significant amount of opportunity here for people to get out there and actually try to sell POTS replacement.
And for people that are, it's like one of these opportunities that's sort of right in front of you, literally, right? In other words, you can begin with the clients you already have.
Yeah, I mean, think about every business that's out there right now. I'm willing to wager 90% of them have some form of POTS lines in their organization. Historically, when we thought about, going to the cloud from a communication standpoint, UCaaS, if you will, it was always leave mission critical stuff behind on these copper lines. And with really what's been going on in the industry, and I know we'll talk a little bit about this, it's really now's the time you have to move off of it. You can't leave it behind anymore. And so we got to have solutions that actually really kind of address that conundrum, if you will.
When is the right time to do it?
Now.
Yeah.
If anything, you should at least be researching and formulating a plan of what you're going to do when you either get a notice to deprecate those lines or whether, and this will be hurtful, you get hit with a rate increase that you weren't expecting, right? And again, I know we'll cover some of that, but I think this is now the time that every partner, whether you are an agent, whether you're a VAR, a trusted advisor, a reseller, whatever it may be, now's the time to actually be thinking about how you're going to incorporate this into the portfolio and actually leverage it to get out there and strike up these conversations, especially with that basic clients you already have. This is in many ways, a new topic, a new old topic to kind of come back into and have those conversations. And if that parlays into other conversations within the business that help you drive or monetize, then hey, by all means, leverage us as a Trojan horse.
And as we discussed before our podcast began, people are starting to hear about this, certainly. So they're hearing people come by and say, hey, we're the right solution. We're the right partner. Why Ooma AirDial? What makes Ooma AirDial unique?
Well, we have a couple things. One is we built Ooma AirDial from the ground up specifically for fire life safety environments. I highlight that because we have seen where, some of the competitors within the landscape will bundle or package together other solutions to try to deliver a compliant solution. Not always the most easy to use, easy to implement, and in many cases, not always compliant for like some of the national guidelines that are out there for like fire life safety. So one, it is our device we built from the ground up. We really put a lot of emphasis, if we're going to do this and replace POTS, what were all the weaknesses that POTS lines had? And a big chunk of that was visibility. So we put together a pretty robust cloud platform where our partners and our clients can actually, not only from a visibility standpoint, but they can actually manage individual devices and the lines that they're supporting. That visibility goes a long way to what was always, I chuckle because it was always, hey, copper is like the safest thing. You set it, forget it. You just didn't know if it was down because you had no visibility to it. And now we're given that. So that's another area. The other is, we're controlling the full supply chain from that aspect. It's the software, it's the hardware, it's the supply chain. It's we're one of the only ones that I'm aware of that have the MFBN, Managed Facilities Voice Network credentials for the 4 big LTE carriers in the U.S. So T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, and U.S. Cellular. They have a great rural play. It's one of the reasons why T-Mobile is moving forward in the acquisition of them. But we have that. We can support Canada. The other real big significant thing, Doug, is when you think fire life safety, specifically, that are being serviced by these POTS lines, fire life safety is just that. It's fire life safety. This an area you just can't take chances are. And so we have a very robust resiliency play in what we have called multipath transport. It's basically leveraging not only the LTE that's on the device, but Ethernet as well. And we can duplicate voice packets so that it's truly active. It's not a failover from a primary network to a secondary network where voice traffic is sensitive. It can typically drop. Because it's truly active, those emergency calls stay up. And so I always talk to people like, hey, if you're stuck in an elevator and you're on with emergency personnel and one of the routes is impacted, do you really want to reinitiate another call and try to get somebody and probably get somebody different who doesn't already have the background of what you're going through? No, just builds so much more anxiety. And so that MPT, that multipath transport, is a very significant differentiator for us as well. I would claim that we are probably the most resilient POTS in a box solution out there in the market.
So we have some slides to take a look at today.
Yeah, I love it. It's nothing like visualizing all the things I'm trying to talk about, right? So
Absolutely.
why don't we start with, Doug, a little bit of an intro to Ooma for those who don't know us, because we are talking about fire life safety. And you may have heard of us, but you may be wondering about what our credibility is. And so it's worth noting that we have been around for a while. We've been around since 2004. So we're certainly not a fly-by-night organization. And one of the things I would tell you is we actually have a long history in doing analog to digital conversion. But the other thing I really love to highlight on this slide is the fact we are supporting, well over 2.5 million endpoints on our network. And that just speaks to our ability to scale and support our clients. And really the other thing that I really love to drive here is the fact that we're publicly traded. We're on the New York Stock Exchange. Being publicly traded really kind of holds us to a higher standard because we do get the compliancy and regulatory oversight that's placed on us as an organization. We have to be transparent. These are fire life safety devices we're connecting to. So we are going to make sure we dot those I's and cross those T's. It's very important from that aspect. And, when we go beyond just who Ooma is, let's talk about a little bit what's driving the market. And we touched on it a little bit. For a couple of years ago, the FCC in essence deregulated this whole side of the industry. And it was a lot of it due to the pressure the incumbents were placing on them. They don't want to maintain those copper plants that they have, right? It's expensive for them to maintain it. They've been deteriorating, so the cost of repair or the length of repair has been increasing. The need to have copper within a building or a company has been diminished. You don't need as much as other technologies that are out there. So for a long time, they've been trying to move it out. We talked about AT&T, in their investor meeting a couple months ago. One of the things they also done is they actually been trying to, like in California, they petitioned to be removed as the carrier of last resort. So there are things that are just really happening. And, one of the things that we see with that is a lot of the deprecation of these lines in certain territories or certain areas. We monitor what's called the FCC wireline notices. This is where a lot of the incumbents are notifying the FCC for material changes to their network. And this is important, right? If you look at just this is last year. This doesn't include this quarter, but if you just look, you can see a significant uptick right up and to the right in that Q4. And that's right after when AT&T made the announcement. But most of these wireline notices are deprecation notices. They are going to shut down. And it's not just AT&T. Verizon has gone out. They've been saying they're going to accelerate their copper retirement. We see it with Windstream. We see it with a bunch. And so that's one of the drivers why we're saying now is the time. Because a couple of years ago when everybody said, hey, August 2022, that's the date. That's the date when, in essence, all the hands come off of it. It wasn't that they were going to be shut down. And I know organizations and marketing teams that love to create fear, right? Try to drive demand. That wasn't it. But what has happened with this deregulation is not only deprecation, but this other significant thing that clients are facing, which is what was a POTS line that typically was anywhere between 50 and $100 has gone significantly up. And I love this example that I'm sharing with everyone here because it's a real example of one of our partners who was paying $100 a line for their POTS lines. And this was, again, to their mission critical endpoints, right? And what was interesting was, and this is something I never really thought about until I got more involved here. A lot of these, because there's just a couple lines, a lot of these invoices are going right to the AP department. Nobody's actively managing them. And so the AP department gets the invoice. Are they really reading all the notices? Generally not. They're writing the check, right? Well, the following month, so if you notice here, for example, there's a notice of rate increase that was embedded. The following month, this provider added a $900 per line surcharge to the 100, so effectively making it $1,000. Now, again, if I'm a partner out there and I'm thinking, is this a time for me to sell? Yes, because it makes it easier when you're trying to save money for a client, right? But think about this. If they're looking for budget for other areas, and this is something we're doing a lot of education on, if I was exposed for 1 month to that $1,000 line, I'm exposed to roughly $13,000. But by the time I go out and research a solution and then get it implemented, I'm exposed to a whole second month. That's 25 plus grand. That 25 plus grand, if you're a school district, that's laptops for a classroom, right? If you're a hospital, that could be for other medical equipment that could be leveraged. And we know that more companies are facing budgetary constraints, and this is an area that our partners can go in and advise and try to find budget or try to save money before they get hit, which could affect them in other areas. So yeah, the time is now because the deprecation orders are definitely increasing significantly, and the pricing as well. Now with that, we should talk a little bit about what we mean when we say fire life safety. So AirDial, the device that we purposely built for this environment, really was meant to address these 9 primary buckets that you see on the screen. The top 3 we all already recognize, elevators, fire alarms, security panels, right? These other 6 are very pertinent though. It's access points, whether they're gated or door controllers. It's emergency call boxes. These are the blue light phones that you see. You find these not only in municipalities and school districts, colleges. You find these in parking garages, storage facilities, any place that might have something that you need to press to get emergency personnel. And so it's a great application here. Faxing, I talked about the medical industry briefly on the previous slide. Faxing is still a significant part of a medical industry's requirements from a technology standpoint. It seems funny that we still have all these physical fax machines out there, but in order for us to support that, we need to support the faxing protocol end to end, and we do, which really is why we can support the high volume faxes of 40, 50 pages that needed to be transmitted and received reliably. IoT, a lot of times have out-of-band management or out-of-band requirements that's leveraging copper. And so boiler rooms, HVAC systems, gas meters, we see a lot of that in the energy field. That's a strong application. And then really, there's still a ton of PBXs out there and key systems that have analog lines that are servicing them. And a lot of times they're just for failover for E911, and we can support that as well. So the application here is pretty wide, but again, there's not a business that I can think of in the US that doesn't probably have at least one POTS line. Typically, if you look at the 80-20 rule, it's 2 to 3, right? Now, fire life safety. And we talk a little about where it hits. This is an area that we also need to understand, and it's an area we lean into. There are national guidelines for this. So NFPA 72 is the National Fire Protection Association. That article is all about how the fire panels need to communicate with the monitoring stations. And there's some things that we need to make sure we check the box for. One is, has to have a backup battery. You have to have power continuity, right? It needs to be on a private network, hence the MFVN, Managed Facilities Voice Network aspect, right? But other compliancy things that we have to consider, ASME or ASME, these are communications guidelines for the elevators. It's the UL certification, the making and manufacturing of these type of devices. One I've never heard anybody ever talk about, but the guidelines that are helping protect the public for lithium batteries, right? So the UN 38.3, we've got to make sure these operate and transport in a safe manner. And this is a shared line. It's a POTS replacement, right? So as its nature, we're falling back into compliance for things like PCI and HIPAA. We do support, because E911 requirements, the Ray Bombs Act and Kerry's Law. And we've run it through its paces. California State Fire Marshal, we were accredited up on their website. FDNY, the Fire Department of New York, very, very stringent in what applications they allow into the Class A buildings here in New York City, and we've gotten that approval. So it does provide a lot of help and guidance. We have white papers that our partners can access to really understand that it's not just putting an ATA out there, right? This is a truly compliant solution. And to give you everybody an idea of what we're talking about, we'll place AirDial typically in the demarcation location where the copper lines are coming in, the 66 block, right? The rat's nest. And we'll terminate all those endpoints, all those POTS devices into the back of AirDial with an RJ11 jack. So it's just trying to simplify it. It's kind of in the DNA of our company. We want to keep things very simple from that perspective where we can, right? Now we know older panels, older modem-based environments can be a little bit complex, but that's something that we do a very good job at because it is our hardware, it is our software. There's a lot of things that we can do to kind of address that. But once we have the AirDial or the voice packets going across AirDial, typically we're transmitting them over LTE, right? And so it's those 4 carriers that I mentioned, the T-Mobile, US Cellular, Verizon, AT&T, that's great. We'll keep it all private. We'll keep them cross-connected, their facilities with ours to keep that traffic secure and encrypted. That's important. But we also, as I highlighted as one of our differentiators, if you want to leverage Ethernet as well, by all means do, right? Because when you do that, we will enable multi-path transport where we'll duplicate those voice packets and send it over both routes. That's that resiliency play that goes very far in trying to meet the needs of facilities managers or safety compliance officers or those type of things. We're seeing right now a lot of these panels are getting cellular modules plugged in. That's great. It's an inexpensive route. Typically doesn't give you management functionality, and a lot of times is singularly honed to an LTE provider. It may not have some of the redundancy or the reliability. And again, I'm going to stress this: fire, life, safety, right? So it's important that we make sure we make these as resilient as we can. I think it's always worthwhile to kind of get a picture of what these devices look like, right? So I have one obviously that was over my shoulder, but here's one that's actually depicted wall mounted in one of those demarcation points. You look at the power strip right below, it kind of gives you a sense of the size, right? It's a fairly small form factor. It's only it's about 3 to 4 pounds. But again, very easy to terminate from there because that's where all the wires are coming in. We can make all the cross connects and whatnot. But we've done some things to try to make this, again, back to the easy aspect. If you look, there's a little LCD screen on that device, and that LCD screen gives an installer or a facilities manager some visible readouts, like what is the signal levels, right? These are going in basements, right? People are concerned about this. What's the signal level of the LTE? What's my battery status? Here's something I love. It's a value add. Mm-hmm. What's connected to what? We know historically POTS lines, that rat's nest didn't know what was connected. The labels long disappeared. People were afraid to disconnect them. Sometimes they just kept paying for them because they didn't know what it was connected to, and they didn't want to terminate it, right? Well, now it becomes a nice chance to audit and do an asset management rollout, and now you'll know, right? And the portables will show same thing. You'll have access to all of that. But let's talk about the signal concern, right? Everybody's worried about that, and I get it, right? These things are going in basements and they're going in equipment rooms that are surrounded by metal and everything else. I'll tell you, we have seen probably a 92% success rate in obtaining signal through the various methods we have. So one of the things, understand, when we built the device, we optimized all the chipset for signal. It's not an internet backup device. It's not like a cradle point or anything like that. It's strictly for this. So by optimizing the signal, we can get a little extra gain. And so if we get 2 bars or 2 stars, we're fully operational. But we also have antenna extension options, right? We have 50 and 100 foot. We have an exterior mounting kit that can go outside a building if need be. But frankly, it's the wiring outside the building that's been, depreciating. The wiring inside the buildings usually are still pretty good. So if we need to re-terminate one of the riser wires to place the device in another area of the building to get that signal, we can do that. And so there's a lot of different ways that we've done that to get the signal. It shouldn't be the overarching concern for your prospects out there. Now, I will highlight one other thing because it goes back to the fact that I keep saying we purposely built this for fire life safety. One way to see that is the power cord's a locking power cord. You can't accidentally unplug it. The power switch is a recessed power switch. You can't accidentally turn it on or turn it off. Now, bringing POTS into the 21st century, and I was kind of alluding to this at the top. We're going to do this, let's do it in a way that really modernizes the approach. And so I can now have a cloud-based portal. We call it Remote Device Manager. It gives facility managers, building owners, safety compliance, it gives whoever you would designate visibility to all of their devices across their domain. So if you think about some of these REITs that we've serviced, right? They've got apartment buildings or buildings that they're managing up and down, a region, right? They have hundreds of units that are deployed. They're going to want visibility to that. Right? They're not going to always have the local person. They might have somebody who's regional covering that. Same thing with school districts and a lot of these other, assisted living facilities. A lot of these people have distributed environments. So having a cloud-based portal allows them to have that visibility, the things that I showed you on the little LCD screen, right? Battery levels, signal levels, asset management, knowing what's connected to what. But now I can get granular. It's a customizable portal in the standpoint of how you wish to view it. If you want to add columns, maybe you want to look at the temperature of the device and add a column there so it could be featured. By all means, let's do that, right? If you want to get into the individual devices for configuration, we can do that too. Now, one of the things I love about it is that it's a hierarchical platform, so I can designate different people, different roles and responsibilities for getting in there. The other thing that I think is very important is, when I talk about the configuration, you're connected to an elevator or you're an alarm panel or maybe a fax machine. They all have different unique characteristics that we want to make sure that we set the right mode for, right? And so if we're going in there and I'm going to connect to an elevator, I could set the mode for a voice line. I could set it for an alarm panel so that it makes the implementation go easier and smoother. The other thing that I think that really sets us apart is our capabilities wrapped around alerting. If a POTS line went down, as I mentioned, you didn't know it was down usually until you had an audit done or an inspection done or something like that. Or maybe the alarm panel wasn't communicating and you woke up at 3:30 in the morning to go deal with it, right? Well, now I can alert you for certain conditions. And this is critical. I think this is a big thing for fire life safety. If your device goes out of service, I can notify you via SMS or email letting you know. I might need your POTS line set, right? If it kicks into the battery, it might indicate there's a power outage. So let's notify you. And then, there's some other things that we've done as well is notification for calls. So if I am stuck in that elevator, I can notify you of that event. And, if somebody's pressing that button. Same thing with like a pool phone at a condo, an apartment complex, they lift it up, does a ring down. I can send an alert. Same thing with the PBXs. But the other thing I'm going to highlight before I move to the next slide, we actually have a nice little dashboard, a business intelligence dashboard, right? Where if I'm managing hundreds and hundreds of these devices, I'm not going to scroll through looking for what's out or what's if there's any impact. I'll create a nice little health check view here that you see on the upper right-hand corner, where I can get a quick status, a health status. It's perfect people who have their own operations center, network operations center, where they want to monitor all this. Makes it very easy and very applicable, very useful from that perspective. Now, let me just wrap this all up. We're going to kind of put the wrapper around it, if you will, right? The POTS in a box segment is a growing segment. There are a lot of players that are in the space or starting to enter the space. Some of them are resellers of ours that are actually selling AirDial, which is great. So you can work with us direct. You can work us with one of our resellers. But here's the thing. We're the only ones that have built the hardware, the software, and really all the way through end to end. Others have acquired other technologies. Others are bundling technologies. I do think this gives us a leg up from an innovation standpoint, like some of these alerting capabilities. It gives us a lot of gravitas when it comes to solving for certain issues like modem-based scenarios, right? These are things that can be problematic. We've done a lot of work with our firmware and with the software to address a lot of these areas that some of our competitors failed. In fact, a lot of our business comes from failed implementations, unfortunately, or fortunately for us, I guess. But it is something that we're very acutely focused on. The management capabilities, that software, I'm telling you, is second to none. It's something I argue internally with my team and the teams I'm working with. We have to really lean in and talk about the software. That is a game changer, right? We always love to talk about the technology and the hardware, but the software goes a long way. Something else too that I'm looking at the slide is just reminding me, E911, right? We support E911 at the port level, not the device. And that's important because in these campus environments or spread out environments where you have different lines going to different areas, we want to send the emergency personnel to the right location, not the closet. And so that's important. There are some bundled solutions out there where they cobble together different things. They can't do that. And so that's important to note. And then, of course, the MPT. But Doug, I got to tell you, I'm in sales. I'm going to make this thing sound the best thing, ever. But the reality is, let me lean on to some third-party credibility here, right? So we have won awards with this solution since we went GA out in the market. The bottom three, I think, are very relevant for this audience. The ELE. It's Elevator World's Award for Best Communication System for Elevators. We got that last year. So it tells you a little bit about what we're focusing, right? The Internet Telephony Product of the Year Award, that was MPT in rolling it out into AirDial. That's a patented solution that we've had on our UCAS solution for years. So to roll it into AirDial and leverage that really was a strong, not only differentiator, but a strong play for us. Vision Award, it's another award we just recently won. It's Facilities Net. Facilities Net are these media outlets that are servicing these Class A buildings and large buildings, and they gave us an award for one of the best safety devices for buildings. So it's not like we're talking all the voice stuff. We're talking about things that are very focused in facilities and in this particular industry. And so I think it's worth noting that we've won awards here. It's a great feather in the cap. And then the one we really are proud of, because we just got this, it's a Frost & Sullivan. It's an acknowledgement that we have really the best practices when it comes to pots in a box solutions and how we replace them. Whether we're leveraging private networks, whether we're leveraging, the resiliency play from an MPT, the way we're deploying or implementing these things. It's just a myriad of things that go into this. It's not as simple as everybody really wishes to make it, right? There can be some complexity, but we've done a lot of work on the processes and implementation to make it go well. So I do say this is really honestly the time to jump in. And if you're not selling it, at least get informed so that you can educate your customers on what is occurring, because you don't want them caught with their pants down and get exposed to $25,000 of stuff that they didn't mean to, right?
So Dave, as we wrap up our podcast today, I couldn't help but notice that as we were rolling through our presentation, there were some sirens in the background, more than once, a couple of times.
Well, Doug, they were using AirDial for reliable, quality communications to those emergency personnel.
I think it does demonstrate to everybody that emergencies happen, right? And whoever was on the other end of those sirens probably didn't expect to be involved in an emergency. It's going to be the least expected place at the least expected time. And that's why, the enterprises need to be looking at this. The channels really need to be looking at this on behalf of the people they serve. Where can we learn more about Ooma AirDial?
You can come to our website, so ooma.com/AirDial. That's a great location. If you're already working with any of the TSDs from an agency perspective, you can get with your local channel manager. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we do have quite the portfolio of resellers that are out there. And if you're working with a reseller you really like and they're not leveraging AirDial, you should tell them they should actually look at our technology. And so got a lot of different ways to find us.
Dave, I want to thank you for joining me today. This has been very interesting. I know we're going to be continuing this hot topic, but for now, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Doug. It's always a pleasure.